Everyone, welcome to HR Tech Talks. I'm so glad to have you here with us and looking forward to a great conversation today. Goodness, I was chatting with our guest a few minutes ago, getting ready for the show today, and I can't help but like pepper her with questions. Like there's all these different things that are coming up and things that I'm curious about around this topic of perks at work and the way that we meet people where they are and the way we bring things that they're looking for from us and not just the thing we tell them they want. So again, we'll get into all that stuff and I don't want to steal too much thunder because it's going to be a great conversation. But as always, thank you for joining us. If you're out there and you want to say hello, please chime in. Let us know where you're connecting in from. As always, I'm here in the Huntsville, Alabama area, and our guest is up in Boston. She said it's snowy. Not snowy today. It's going to be 60 degrees outside. So we're going to enjoy that in just a little while with the kids. So before we dive into the conversation and bring our guest on, I just want to give you a heads up reminder that the HR Tech Awards still open for submissions. That's closing in March. It's going to, it seems like it's so far away, but now that we're getting into February, it's going to be here before we know it. So just a heads up, if you're out there and you're serving companies and you're one of the companies that we feature here on the show, then you might want to check that one out and see if it's something that's a fit for you. So with all that, all the fun stuff out of the way, I think we're ready to dive in to the conversation and welcome Amy Spurling here from Compt. We're going to talk about, as I said, perks and all the other good stuff in and around that. The funny picture, I'll bring her on. I'll tell her really quick. The funny picture in my head. Welcome, Amy, by the way. The funny picture in my head is I remember the basket that I had, this woven basket in the corner of my office with all the little gift cards and other things that we would do when we were first getting started with this and trying to figure out how we're going to do it right. That was just that someone's like, well, just get a bunch of gift cards. I'm like, yeah. Okay, fine, I will. But that's how I started 1,000 years ago when I worked in HR, was trying to figure out how to give employees something that was flexible, something that they might appreciate, and something that was outside the norm. So anyway, that was a fun way we began that. But I'm looking forward to talking with you today about some of the ways that you're enabling companies to do this for all their people. So I'm glad to have you here on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, before we get to all the fun stuff, again, I'm all fired up as you can't tell, but please tell the audience a little more about who you are and what you do, please.
Sure. My name is Amy Spurling. I'm the founder and CEO here at Compt. We've been around about 4 years. We help companies really build employee stipends and rewards and making them really customizable and personalized to employees. So trying to meet every single employee where they are, but do that at scale. My background is that I'm a 3-time former CFO. I was basically living the painful side of this where we're on the, buying all these things, trying to make our teams happy, and just didn't work. And so bring all this stuff in, nobody would use it. And I finally got frustrated enough. I was like, this is literally what software should be doing. So let's go start a company that can make everyone happy, including my finance and HR teams that are really tired of being vendor management. So that's what we've been doing for the last 4 years.
The way I was going to open that up and you just hit it, actually, I was going to say, this is one of those things that when you say, perks and things like that, people like them. But
right.
Then on our side, it's one more
painful.
headache, one more thing to manage, one more.
It's the worst. You can only be punished for it. No matter what you bring in, somebody wishes you brought in something else. I don't want that. Why can't I have something else? Like, that was the most common thing I heard. And she's like, oh my goodness. Like, you're not wrong. You should have personalized compensation. We're spending money on things that is literally your compensation, and it's stuff you can't use. So the employee wasn't wrong, but there was nothing out there. There was no software. There was no way of doing this other than just bringing in this like laundry list of stuff that nobody used, 3 to 5% for any given thing.
And one of the things you were telling me earlier is we can bring in this broad selection of, 20 different companies trying to help us offer all these things. But then it becomes the headache of managing all those relationships and, they changed this thing or that policy over there. And we can't, pay for that thing now or whatever else. And it just makes my heart beat faster. Thinking about all the stress associated with all those things.
Well, and then you get into the tax piece. Like, so much of this is taxable. You mentioned gift cards. Every single gift card is taxable.
Yes.
And so as soon as you give it to an employee, you have to tax them before they even use the thing. What a terrible employee experience to be like, why was money just taken off my paycheck? Like, for an Applebee's gift card when I can't even go to Applebee's? Like, what is that?
Well, I'd love to hear from you. One of the things you get to do is when you're working with your customers, you get to see across that spectrum. And I know you do a lot of research as well about what things people actually want. And so I'd love for you to share with the audience of HR leaders listening in right now, what sort of things are people asking for when it comes to perks at work?
Sure. So there's a couple of different pieces there. There's what people want and what they're asking for, and then what HR is doing. And those are two very different things for the most part, unfortunately. HR is trying to bring in as many different things to meet as many different needs as you can. But the more you bring in, the more employees check out. You have a laundry list of things that are like amazing, really fantastic perks, student loan forgiveness, fertility benefits, pet insurance, like you name it, it's probably on a wiki page somewhere and nobody's using it. So it's not solving for the outcome of hiring or retaining. What we found, we actually ran a study and looked at 8,700 of our users last year. 8,700 people, 12 months, said how many different vendors could they possibly use? Because that's what you'd have to build as a marketplace. Guess how many different vendors they used? Unique vendors. So each one used one time for 8,700 people in the course of a year.
I can't even imagine. Goodness. It's probably some astronomical number, right? When we start
27,000. 27,000 different vendors. That is impossible for HR to possibly do. And even if you had 27,000 vendors, no one's scrolling through 27,000 things to find the one that they want. Like the concept of bringing in vendors and bringing in solutions doesn't work. That's why there's no utilization. It's not meeting the needs of employees, and it's so expensive. You're paying across so much of the team for people who aren't even using these things. So it's just a completely broken approach if you're actually trying to reach the outcome of really high engagement and making your people feel supported and having something unique in the marketplace and competing for talent. So a different approach is what we're seeing work in the market, which has been really exciting.
I know that when we would roll something out, I would hope for, 10 or 15, or like maybe my wildest dreams, 20% of people would really want to latch onto that offering we have. And yet it was often in the single digits. Like what's a common sort of number there? Is that what you've seen in your own experiences? And what's the difference when someone switches over to something like Compt?
So that is absolutely what we see. We usually see like individual perk vendors. So whether it's pet insurance or student loan forgiveness, it's usually 3 to 5% is pretty normal. It's terrible, but it's normal. When you start working to a little bit of those marketplaces, you could get a wellness marketplace. You usually see 20, 25% utilization. What we're seeing is that with stipends and employee perk stipends, last year we had over 90% utilization. So 90% of people used over 90% of the funds given to them through their stipends. And it still has a sandbox. It's not like it's a piggy bank, because that's pointless as well. It's still HR saying, hey, we want you to focus on wellness or on family or on professional development. You're giving them a sandbox, but now you're creating so much more flexibility, which is flexibility is the maximum. Like that's the key thing for employees now.
Yes. Well, that's what our research shows. Absolutely. That people are asking for flexibility at work. And when employees ask for flexibility, employers immediately hear, oh, they want to work from home, or they want to work from their couch. They want, some other schedule or something else.
Right.
And the data actually show that that's way down the list. They're looking for things like this. They're looking for ways to flex the options they have available to them when it comes to total compensation or other things they have access to at work. Don't give me the same thing you're giving everybody else, because I'm not everybody else.
Exactly.
And that's never been more true than today, where companies have to recognize that, and they can't just get by with 3% utilization that's okay with us.
Right. Well, you just don't have that option with, you need to hire and you need to retain. And there are plenty of jobs out there if employees want to go somewhere else. And when you look at kind of the compensation stack, a solid 80% of it is your base salary and your health insurance for most kind of employees in certain industries. It's that last 20% where companies are differentiating, which is where employee perks live. And it's the smallest piece of the compensation pie, but it's the one that's the biggest driver. Everyone's offering some sort of health insurance. Everybody's going to offer a relatively similar salary. So how are you going to differentiate? And if an employee is deciding between, I have this flexibility to determine what I think health and wellness is for me versus, oh, well, they've got, a mental health app. Maybe I do or don't like that specific mental health app. It's a no-brainer for employees to be like, I'm going to go and do the things that matter to me.
You talked about a stipend earlier. Talk about that being different than a set of discrete options that you're giving people, because I think that is the true essence of flexibility. Saying this is yours. We're giving this to you, and we're not going to control how you use it. Yes, we'll set some guardrails up, but we're going to give you control over this because it's your money we're giving you. So talk about that piece of it, if you don't mind, how that works kind of mechanically.
Sure. Sure. So with a stipend, a company sets a budget for a group of employees. So it could be the same for everybody. It could be segmented by geography, by who has, part-time, full-time, different roles, however you want to segment the team. But you're basically giving that group a budget for that individual employee who meets those characteristics for a certain time period. So say could be $1,200 a year. Maybe that's broken up quarterly. Maybe that's monthly. Maybe it's $400 a year. But it's saying, here's an amount of money. And by the way, here's the categories we want you to spend in. So the most common ones we see are health and wellness, family, and a lot of times professional development. There may also be cell phone and internet thrown in there, or remote work. So there's crafting a bundle to where it's all of these things as an employer are equal to me. So a remote work stipend, so stipend's the top level, may have categories like cell phone, internet, health and wellness, family. So you think for the employee who is on their parent's cell phone bill, they're not going to use those funds for their cell phone. Somebody else is paying for it, or they just don't care because they're like, I'm going to pay for my cell phone anyways. I'd rather get a cool pair of running shoes. Or for somebody who is thinking about it from the family angle is like, I got the running shoes last month. Maybe that now what I want is a babysitter for the night, or maybe we need some, backup childcare. And so thinking about it that way. So it allows employees to keep flexing within this kind of group of categories as they see fit. And that just allows them to choose their own adventure, but all within things that the company's comfortable with. All these things are equally okay with me as an employer.
I'd love to hear from some of the people who are listening in, by the way, because I've seen Norma, Diana, a couple of you chime in already saying you're listening in. I'd love to hear from some people that are out there. Are you offering some sort of perk, some sort of benefit, some sort of option like this to your people? Just, it doesn't matter what it is. We're beating up a little bit on some of the more specific options, but anything is better than nothing, I would argue. But there is something better than just something, as we're talking about here. There's this spectrum of you don't care at all to like, how can we show that we care the most? So I'd love to hear from somebody out there that's using something. But there's one of the things I was going to throw you back your way when you were sharing a minute ago about the different options there. I know that the idea that we're going to say we hired you because we trust you and we're going to give you this options, this access to this stuff. Have you seen companies that say, hey, one of the values we have is that we care about the community. So we're going to give you a chance to do something to give back, or we really care about your physical well-being, because if you're not well, you can't do your work well. So we're going to emphasize that as a value we have as a company. You see companies lining those two things up?
Absolutely. And that's a big piece of the stipend piece as well. It shouldn't just be a grab bag of random stuff to try and get an employee. Your employee perks should support your company culture. They are not your company culture, but they should support it and enhance it and reinforce that behavior. And so that's where we see companies doing really cool things like focusing on either the community or on wellness in particular. One of the really cool things about stipends versus kind of the marketplace concept, if you had a marketplace that had 10 different things in it for your employees, and your employees are scattered all over the country, but it's like, here's 10 things you could go spend on. The challenge is that marketplace is going to have big box names. It's going to have Amazons and Walmarts and Targets, and you're trying to reach as many people as possible. So you have to go to big names. What's cool is that when you remove that, suddenly people are buying local. So all that money you're spending on your employees, they're then spending in their local communities, and you're supporting them from kind of the bottom up, which is just so incredibly rewarding and cool to see, because that's making, their local environment so much more secure and supported without you having to spend extra money and do extra campaigns to support kind of local communities.
Excellent. I love that. We got a good comment in from somebody I want to get to in just a second, but the community thing, I hadn't even thought about that aspect of it, of from simplification. If I'm running this program and I'm the solo HR person, got my, HR of one hat on, you've got to, as you said, for just simplicity's sake, say, okay, well, they're available everywhere. They'll be able to get really specific and really granular and say, hey, I don't care if you are in Lexington, Kentucky, or Boise, Idaho, or wherever else. Like, we'll find something that's relevant to you, that's relevant to your community, and find a way to plug that back in. That's so fun to allow that person the choice to do that.
Right.
To let them bring that.
they get to choose, right?
Yeah.
So the HR leader is not tasked with finding somebody in Boise,
No,
Idaho,
yeah.
or
Yes, the
in
employee gets to
Lexington,
choose that.
Kentucky,
Yes.
because poor HR leaders, like, that's not possible, especially when you've got employees scattered all over the globe now. It's allowing employees to go and do the things that they want within the sandbox. So it makes it so much easier for HR to manage.
Yes. Thank you for correcting me on that. I wanted to misspeak on that. So one of the comments we had from Diana, I'll throw it up here really quickly. She said that they actually started this stipend back in 2020, when they probably had people starting to go remote and everyone's trying to figure that out. And just saying, hey, you use this how you need to, but you outfit your space
Yes.
the way that works for you. Maybe
Yes.
it's a second monitor or whatever your secret thing is. Amy's like, I've got to have this in my space in order to make it fit me.
Yes. I mean, that's one of the biggest trends we've seen are those remote work stipends. And I love, Diana, that you're calling it a remote work stipend, because home office has this very 1980s home boardroom kind of feel to it, whereas remote work speaks to the way people work. Remote work may be in your home, but it might be in a coffee shop. It might be in a co-working space. It's just not in your physical company space. And so there's different needs around that. It could include paying for co-working if you wanted cell phone, internet, could be your desk, your chair, your monitor, like things like that. That's what's really cool. I love that around remote work stipends. The challenge with the way to approach stipends, though, is there's a taxability issue. Remote work stipends you can definitely do without having to tax employees, but I was actually trying to jerry rig this on like Expensify before starting this company, so way before the pandemic, and was like, I don't care what you do for wellness. Here's $150 for the quarter. Just go do things and leave me out of it. You manage your own wellness. I'm not a fitness instructor or a nutritionist. What I found was, like, every quarter, like clockwork, 6 weeks in, people would come back and be like, so how much do I have left? And you're like, oh my God, am I supposed to go do math on your expense reports? Like, that's not the way this works. And then I realized, oh boy, a lot of this stuff is actually taxable with IRS tax law. How am I tracking that? How am I taxing people? How am I reimbursing them for these things? And so that's where the tax piece became my new headache. So vendor's first headache, tax second headache was like, all right, how do I make that easier? Because I don't want to deal with any of it, basically. And I want to make sure that things that don't need to be taxed don't have to be taxed.
Learned the gift card example you used earlier way back. I learned that one pretty quickly. But I still, on HR forums and user groups and everything else, on a weekly basis, probably see someone say, hey, I just heard that this thing is taxable. Is that really true? You're like, oh gosh, who knows how long they've been doing that thing or whatever else. And so I love this because so I've worked in organizations where I was responsible for payroll, or I also had a payroll person. And when you have something like this, where it's simplified, where the headaches are not there, that makes their job so much easier. That makes the relationship so much better, all those kinds of things. And you don't think about how much stress that puts on them to make sure all the little things, like, hey, I know you've already got all the employees to pay and all the stuff to check, but I'm going to add in these 3 other things that are going to randomly rotate every other month or every other week.
Right. Well, and then you just turn your HR and finance teams into vendor management, which is not like I want my HR team being. They add so much value around thinking about progressing my workforce, performance management, professional development. Why would I have them just doing vendor management? What a waste of their brain power, when it takes a lot of time and is a huge headache, but doesn't speak to all the amazing things they bring to the table. So trying to get HR back to doing HR rather than doing the vendor management piece, because HR hates it, obviously, and rightly so, because it's not taking advantage of their amazing skill set.
We've talked a lot about our headaches as HR leaders. I think we could commiserate on that stuff like all day long, probably.
Oh yeah.
But one of the things that came to me a minute ago is we did the study about 2 years ago, and one of the big takeaways was, if you, as an employee, if you are not average, then you essentially don't exist when it comes to collecting data and saying, okay, we're going to say, hey, 70% of our people want this benefit, whether they use it or not, right? 70% say they want it.
Right.
But if you're in that 30%, you essentially don't exist for all intents and purposes when they're measuring those things.
Right.
And this makes those people and their desires and the things they need visible in a way that wasn't visible before.
Right. That's absolutely, it's an interesting spin on it. I haven't thought about it that way, where it's like they are invisible, but you're absolutely right. And in this market where you're trying to hire and retain people, so many companies are trying to figure out, all right, how do I stand out from the noise, since literally everyone is hiring. And so figuring out how to do that, if you just keep supplying benefits for the group that you have, because you certainly need to retain your people, you're going to attract more of the same group of people over and over and over again. You're never going to hire anybody different, which is definitely a problem in an organization. If you don't have diversity across a lot of different spectrums, you're not going to end up ultimately succeeding as a company. You're going to be very echo chamber. You're going to be one note, same generation, same stage of life, same all the things, right? But why would you pay for benefits for people you don't have? That doesn't make sense from an HR and finance perspective. Stipends can solve for that. You can say, we support wellness, but you're not saying, hey, you've got to go run a triathlon, or hey, it's about yoga. Maybe it is about mental health. Maybe it is about, nutrition. Maybe it's about any number of things. Maybe it's about financial health. And so allowing for a much broader view of that, which can reach different generations and locations and, people at every stage of life.
When companies right now are trying to figure out, how do we stand out from everybody else, right? Not just the hiring, as you're saying, but also just keeping people here, because they're getting hit from all sides. And whether someone can buy running shoes this month or not, that's not the thing that's going to make them stay.
Exactly.
It's the fact that you are making them feel like the things that are important to them are important to you too.
That's
as an
exactly
organization.
Right.
And as you said earlier, you don't have to be the HR person that I always pride myself, like I knew everybody's name, and I knew if they had a child or a spouse. I tried to know all those names too when we were small enough to do that. But I couldn't tell you who liked to run on the weekends. I couldn't tell you like all the things about all the people. Right. But this means you don't have to know all those things. If you wanted to, really, you could probably find some of the things out. Hey, they're using this regularly for mental health benefits. They're using this regularly for.
Maybe they want you to know it, by the way. It's okay to have some things private. Like maybe you do need it for mental health benefits, and maybe you don't really want to share that with your entire company. This allows for that as well, where you can say, we support that, but we're not getting all up in your business, because like it allows for a little bit of space too, where it's not on HR to know every single thing about every person. Because just because you're in a company doesn't mean somebody needs to know all your business, but it allows for that support at the same time, which is really nice too.
Goodness gracious. I've had so much fun with this topic, this idea of doing this differently. Again, because I've seen it done poorly. I've probably been the one to do it poorly.
Oh, I've definitely done it poorly.
Right? Like, we're all part of that club where we've everything I do well, I screwed up the first time. So I've often put it to the kids. If someone is out there listening right now, is there a piece of practical advice or something you might tell them about how to listen to their people, what they want, or something else? Any practical advice you might give to the other leaders out there that might help them to make 2022 the year that they actually do this well?
Yeah. Well, and I think especially for HR, because there's always an HR finance dynamic. HR has amazing ideas all the time, and finance is like, costs too much money, not going to do it, right? And I was both of those people. So I think part of the important thing to think about right now when you're looking at the hiring situation, when you're looking at retention, is focus on outcomes. Don't focus on how you get there. Focus on your outcomes. What do you need to do? What does turnover cost you? Show that case to your CFO. If it's 2.5 times the cost of an employee, there's budget for things to retain people. If it's needing to hire, what happens if you don't hire? What happens, within the business? Are you able to hit your business objectives? And then once you know what outcomes you're trying to reach, then you can start building a program, and you've got your case basically made for you, because they've already agreed on the outcomes. Now you're just directing the path to get there and making that case. And so starting with end game rather than building from the bottom up, because that's a really hard place for HR to be like, hey, I think we should do X. And again, finance is just like, too much money, not going to do it. I'm like, well, are you comfortable losing 40% of our people and what that's going to cost us this year? No? Okay, well then we have budget. We got to do some things.
Yeah, let's come back together. Let's talk about this again in more concrete terms, because you obviously didn't catch the full gist of what I was trying to say there.
Yeah.
I've done that wrong. I probably admitted it here on the show a couple of times, by the way, that the first time I ever pitched a program or an idea to my boss, CEO, I pitched it as, it'll make my job easier. And that's a terrible suggestion, by the way. Please don't ever do that. Cringeworthy now, yes, thinking back. I learned quickly, though, what you were just saying. I mean, let's tie this back to what it means to the business. Are the operational leaders going to be able to hit their goals if we don't do this thing to hire the right people, to keep them functional and happy and engaged to the degree that we can within our
Right.
bubble of HR, the things we can do.
Right.
And I think that's a great way of putting it, because if you go in saying, okay, we just need a budget to give people more stuff,
Right.
that's going to be hard to
That's
sell.
a really hard sell. And honestly, most companies now have some sort of a budget. It's figuring out how to make that budget. Like, that's the beauty of stipends. You can take money you are already spending. You don't have to spend net new money. You just use it in a way that is a lot more effective, and you transition that over. So many companies now have cell phone reimbursement or internet reimbursement or some sort of remote work or some sort of health and wellness. There's something in your company. If you're hiring and retaining at all, there's something there. You got budget to work with, and it doesn't take a lot. It's not about size of budget to get utilization. It's actually about flexibility. Nobody like, you could do amazing. You could do 90% utilization and employee engagement off of 50, $75 a quarter. You could do the same thing off of thousands of dollars a month. It's not about the money. It's about the flexibility piece for employees.
Yes. I've enjoyed this so much, and thank you for joining us. If there's, how can someone follow you? How can they learn more about Compt? I'm sure that some of the audience is curious about just to dive deeper, maybe see some examples or other case studies or whatever else. Probably have those on the website, but I don't want to speak for you. Tell me
Sure.
how they can find that.
Sure. They can certainly check us out at compt.io, compt.io. Or if they want to reach out to me, Amy at compt.io, I'm happy to chat as well.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you again for joining us and for sharing your passion for this conversation and this concept, and helping to make lives better for all the HR leaders out there that really needed a leg up.
Thank you so much. It was great chatting with you.
Absolutely. Everybody else, I hope you enjoyed the show today. Got some good ideas, some good suggestions. I'm over here thinking, like, what would I use that stipend for? And already, figuring in my head, trying to figure out where that would go. So I would encourage you to think about that. I saw some good comments. Thank you, Diana and Norma, for chiming in today, and some of the others that are listening in. Thank y'all for chiming in, and be sure to take a moment, as she said, think about the impact you can have on the business, how you can do that, how you can approach that, because that's the way that you're going to sell this internally, and not just to sell it and get the win for you, but to win for everyone, your people that use it. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your week. We'll catch you again next week on HR Tech Talks.